Intersekcionalitātes istaba ir vieta, kurā mēs apzināmies, ka visas apspiešanas formas, tāpat kā visas atbrīvošanās formas, ir savstarpēji saistītas. Tā ir vieta, kurā mēs kritiski izvaicājam, apšaubām un dekonstruējam, bet vienlaikus arī iztēlojamies iekļaujošāku un drošāku pasauli nākotnē un jau tagad. Šajā podkāstu sērijā es sarunājos ar Džeju Morganu. Džej ir Austrālijā dzīvojoša nebināra satura veidotāja un mūziķene. Tenan dzīvo ar vairāka veida invaliditāti, tostarp fizisku invaliditāti, neiroatšķirību un hroniskām slimībām. Lai gan daļa no tām Džej ir jau kopš dzimšanas, Tenan neapzinājās sevi kā cilvēku ar invaliditāti līdz 20 gadu vecumam, kad Tenan hroniskās slimības strauji progresēja un Džej lielā mērā kļuva spiestena palikt mājās un paļauties uz invaliditātes pabalstu. Tenan veido sociālo mediju saturu par invaliditātes tiesību jautājumiem, nespējas taisnīgumu un citām ar kreisajām idejām saistītām tēmām. Džej veido arī indie punk mūziku, ko iedvesmojusi Tenan ar invaliditāti saistītā pieredze un kas bez maksas ir pieejama dažādās tiešsaistes platformās. Mēs sarunājamies par to, kāpēc invaliditātes pieredze mūs radikalizē un kā tā ierakstās kreisajās un antikapitālisma idejās, par bieži vien ļoti ierobežotajiem priekšstatiem, kādi pastāv saistībā ar invaliditāti un to, kā tā izskatās, par to, ka arī cilvēki ar zemiem ienākumiem ir pelnījuši pieredzēt prieku un darīt lietas, kas patīk, par to, cik ārkārtīgi nozīmīga cilvēkiem ar invaliditāti ir tiešsaistes telpa, un par dažādiem eksistējošiem un neeksistējošiem atbalsta mehānismiem Latvijā un Austrālijā. Mēs pieskaramies arī jautājumiem, kas ir saistīti ar nedrošo finansiālo situāciju un nabadzību, kam cilvēki ar invaliditāti bieži ir pakļauti, un es nedaudz dalos arī savā pieredzē. Un tā kā es līdz šim neesmu publiski par šiem savas pieredzes aspektiem runājusi, šis kaut kādā ziņā ir diezgan ievainojams saturs, kuru publicēt. Tomēr es arī ļoti labi apzinos, ka kauns, kuru mēs jūtam saistībā ar nabadzību un vispār ar grūtībām runāt par naudu un tās trūkumu, ir viens no internalizētas apspiešanas mehānismiem. Un es noteikti šajā podkāstā arī turpmāk vairāk pievēršoties jautājumiem, kas ir saistīti tieši ar nespējas pieredzi, noteikti pieskaršos arī sociālajai un ekonomiskajai realitātei, kas izriet no dzīves ar invaliditāti. Un mani par šiem jautājumiem lielā mērā runāt pamudina un iedvesmo un iedrošina tieši saistīts nespējas kopiena. Es ļoti priecājos, ka Džej piekrita sarunai, un es jau tagad zinu, ka noteikti aicināšu Džeju piedalīties podkāstā atkal, jo ir vēl ārkārtīgi daudz jautājumu, ko es Džeju gribētu uzdot un ar Džeju pārunāt. Es sērijas aprakstā esmu pievienojusi saites uz Džeju sociālo mediju kontiem, kur atrodama gan Tenan mūzika, gan sociālo tīklu saturs par invaliditāti un sociālu taisnīgumu. In this episode, I talk with Džej Morgan. Džej is a queer disabled person living in Australia. Their pronouns are they, them. They live with multiple types of disability, including physical disabilities, neurodevelopmental disabilities, and chronic illness. While they were born with some of these conditions, they did not realize they were disabled until their 20s, when their chronic illnesses developed further and they became largely housebound and reliant on disability pension support. They create social media content about disability rights, disability justice, and broader leftist topics. They also make indie punk music inspired by their experiences with disability, which is available for free access on various platforms. We talk about why experience of disability radicalizes us and how it connects to leftist and anti-capitalist ideas, about the often very limited ideas people have about disability and what it's supposed to look like, about the fact that people with low income also deserve to experience joy and to be happy at least time to time and do things they like and enjoy, about how important online spaces are to disabled people, and about the various existing and non-existing support systems and mechanisms in Latvia and Australia. We also touch on issues related to financial insecurity and poverty, which disabled people are often exposed to. I also share some of my own experiences, and since I have hardly spoken publicly about these aspects of my life before, publishing this feels a little bit vulnerable. At the same time, I understand and recognize that the shame we feel around poverty and around talking about money and the lack of it in general is a form of internalized oppression. And as this podcast continues to focus more closely on questions related specifically to disability experience, I will definitely continue addressing the social and economic realities that come with living with disability in the future as well. And in many ways, it is exactly the online disability community that encourages and inspires me to speak about these issues. I'm very happy that Džej agreed to have this conversation, and I already know that I will definitely invite them back on the podcast in the future, because there are many more questions I would like to discuss with them. In the episode description, I have included links to Džej's social media accounts where you can find both their music and their content about disability and social justice. And now we go to the conversation with Džej. I follow your content on Instagram for a while now, and I really like it because I find it very comforting and encouraging the way how you speak about disability, and I especially love that you speak both about your daily life and about you show the things you do and things you like, and also your personality, but also you challenge the issues in wider society in relation to how disability is perceived and treated, and how what kind of support people with disabilities do receive, or quite contrary, don't receive. So yeah, and I'm also happy that we live in these chronically online times, and I'm able to reach out to you and invite you onto the podcast, and also happy that you agreed. Hi Džej, and welcome onto the podcast.
Hello.
I would like to open our conversation by asking you about a connection between disability and being anti-capitalist and leftist. This is something you have stated on your Instagram channel where I follow you. And yeah, I want to ask you about this because this is something I have also contemplated a lot, because I think that disability is the experience which has radicalized me the most, allowing me to come to the conclusion that this is not the system we should be living in, and this is not the society we should be living in, and we should strive for something better and more inclusive. So yeah, could you please reflect on the connection between the disabled experience and also holding these anti-oppression beliefs, and also maybe do you even believe that under capitalism it's possible to create a support system for disabled people which is just and sustainable and also can really reach all the people who really need it? Or would it be fair to say that being disabled is an anti-capitalist experience per se?
I have a very similar experience to you where disability was the thing that really turned me into an anti capitalist. I've always been pretty aware and against oppression and marginalization of people. But once I realized I was disabled, and especially once I lost my ability to work, it really pushed me away from kind of capitalist beliefs. And, on your point of whether disability is inherently anti-capitalist, I would actually twist it the other way. I would say that capitalism is inherently anti-disability. I think that any economic system that bases a person's value or worth to a society on their ability to work in paid employment is going to inherently disadvantage disabled people, because we are the ones who have reduced capacity to work due to factors outside of our control. You know, whether it's because we can't work at all, whether it's because we can't work full time, whether it's because we can't work manual labor jobs or energy intensive jobs, a lot of us with disability do experience reduced capacity to work. And that means that, especially under capitalism, we are seen as less valuable and less important. And I think, as to your point on, can we create a support system for disabled people under capitalism? I think that would be difficult purely from can a capitalist society justify spending resources on a population that can't work to the full capacity? Because again, we come back to that point of how valuable are disabled people in a society that judges you on your ability to work. And I've seen that sort of rhetoric that we're not worth it, we're not worth spending the money on, a lot in the comment sections of my videos where I speak about the importance of increasing support for disabled people. There's this idea that because we can't work, we should just be grateful to exist for the bare minimum, you know? And so when you are then asking for support to live a normal life, to be able to enjoy things, to be able to engage in society, people see that as excessive or not needed if we can't work and contribute the way they do. I think the other problem is that under capitalism, a lot of these services are privatized, and then the point of them is profit and not actually support. And we see that a lot in Australia at the moment. We've got a disability support scheme called the NDIS, the National Disability Insurance Scheme, that is meant to provide funding for supports for disabled people to live. But we've had this big issue with all of these services being privatized. And essentially, the government just supplies you funding to afford the privatized services. And that has resulted in the cost being significantly more than they planned and they thought it would be. And now they are announcing huge cuts to the funding that they're giving to disabled people to access these privatized supports. And a lot of us look at the scheme and think, why would you not make this a public scheme? Why privatize it? But I think that's just inevitable in a capitalist system, especially one that tends towards neoliberal capitalism like ours does. And so I think that's why a lot of us tend to lean more into socialist policy or communist policy, because that is much more about public services, is much more about, you know, supporting people instead of business. It's not as much about profit. And a lot of the schemes and systems that we have in place to support disabled people already are heavily based in socialist ideals. They're just implemented into a capitalist system. And so, yeah, I think it's only natural that a lot of us become anti-capitalist, because not only is the system actively fighting against us, but it often makes it impossible for us to access the support that we need. And that's why we want change, because we want to be able to live, don't we?
Yeah, for sure. And I also think that you might be the not definitely not the only one, but I think you're the first one who comes in mind, who has like talked about this, that actually it would be fair if disability support would be at least in the amount of the minimum wage. I mean, I guess also other activists are talking about that, but I just that but for example, in the country I live in, I haven't even like heard no one talking about that, even if the so-called leftist leaning parties, which are like promoting the all kinds of um, social supports for various marginalized groups. But this is the idea which I think is too radical for even the most of these people, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I think the left wing of politics, unfortunately, has just as big of a problem with ableism as the right side does,
Yes.
because a lot of these parties, a lot of these people are still operating under capitalism, where we are inherently less valuable. So you see it in Australia too, in terms of actual politics. When people are talking about increasing welfare, they're talking about the age pension for people who've worked their entire lives and are now retired. They're talking about job seeker for people who are unemployed but are able to work. And they're talking about youth allowance for students who are studying to be able to work. You never really get any conversation about disability pension. We get tied into age pension. We operate under the same rules as age pension. We have the same rates as age pension. but we're never mentioned specifically. It feels very much like we're the afterthought. And I think it comes back to that idea that we can't work. That's why we're on disability pension. So we're kind of given up on,
Yeah.
because we can't contribute to the economy in that way.
Yeah. I I also want to ask you about something you have talked a lot about on your channel, and that is the assumption or expectation that disability will always look the same way. And if it doesn't, then there comes these accusations of lying, and these may be like really outright accusations that you are lying or exaggerating your disability, but sometimes these are just these like weird implications that, oh, you actually look quite good. It couldn't be that things are so hard for you. And yeah, this is of course this especially happens when it comes to invisible disabilities, which is even harder for a lot of people, especially able-bodied people, yeah, to even like know and understand and recognize that the disabilities can be also invisible, and you can't always tell whether or not a person is disabled and how disabled they are. And this is something also I have thought a lot about, because I guess people often perceive me as, I guess it depends on the context, because like Latvian society is still very disability is very, very stigmatized here. I mean, everywhere it is, but I think there is the situation specifically since the post-Soviet context and everything. It's quite bad. And sometimes when people like find out when you that you are disabled, and it's like, oh, poor you, you can't do anything, and you should be just locked away and isolated somewhere, and something is just like horrible. But I also know at the same time that in certain contexts, people do perceive me as much less disabled than I actually am, and people have like implied that I may not need the support and the access I'm claiming that I need. And for a very long time, I have also internalized uh, this like perceptions of others, and I'm even have started to think, yeah, maybe I really don't need the support, and maybe I could just try harder and everything will be fine. And then I how it has resulted in like me exhausting myself or even endangering myself in certain situations, because like surprisingly it turns out that your access needs don't go away just because some people think that you don't have them. Yeah, I wanted to ask you about this. What's your experience with people like doubting your disabled experience, and why do you think this even happens? And also like what emotional consequences this has in your experience, and also how do you cope with that?
I think my experience is somewhat similar to yours in the sense that day to day life, I don't look disabled at all, right? There aren't any visible signs. But in certain contexts, I have to use a mobility aid. Like when I do my job, I use a walking stick. When I go to concerts, for example, I use a walker. And so suddenly I have this visible sign of disability, and people suddenly, like, that perception shifts. I go from being perfectly normal, and therefore, if I struggle with anything, it's because I'm not trying hard enough and I'm lazy, to suddenly I'm really disabled. And oh my goodness, you couldn't possibly be in the front row of that concert. That's not safe. We have to hide you in the back corner with all the other disabled people. And it's that weird perception shift. It's a bit of a double edged sword where either you look normal and therefore you can't get any help, or you look disabled and therefore you can't do anything. And I know it's not as bad in Australia as it is in a lot of European countries. I think from what I've read, during and after World War II, there was a lot of incredibly ableist rhetoric around disabled people and what they were able to do. That's still present in those cultures to this day. So thankfully, Australia wasn't as badly affected by that. But we still have it ingrained in our country's culture of this like Aussie battler, this person that fights all the elements in our harsh landscape, and the diggers in the wars who are braving all of these like dangerous frontiers. And it is very much a Australian cultural icon to be this hardworking, fighting underdog, overcoming all odds. And so disabled people can bear the brunt of that a bit because people don't think we're working hard enough. We don't think that we're fighting to overcome our struggles, and that disability is just another struggle for us to overcome. And as you said, you can fight as hard as you want, but then what a surprise, your disability still disables you. And you can't just turn it off when you need to.
Yeah,
And
this.
yeah, so I think oops, sorry.
Sorry.
But yeah, I think it can be frustrating sometimes then, because I haven't changed, right? Like I am still as disabled as I always have been. It's just sometimes I don't look disabled and then I'm not believed. When ironically, when I'm using mobility aids and when I look visibly disabled, I don't need as much help because I have the mobility aid to help. If I'm using a walker, I don't need a seat. I've got a seat with me. I can sit on my walker. But if I walk onto a train without a mobility aid and I sit down, people assume I'm being lazy and I should give up my seat to someone else, even though my needs haven't actually changed at all.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. I guess my access needs are quite different, like because of being partially sighted, and but this one way how this manifests is that, for example, if I go to some, I mean, and I can go quite independently to places I am familiar, I already know quite well. But for example, if I go to other countries, I these days I only am willing to go if I have a support person with me, and usually that would be my partner, because like she also knows me quite well and she understands what kind of help I do need, because there is also often this like problem with people that they try to overhelp you, and then they like kind of think that you can't do anything, and yeah, treat you like a child, and this patronizing manner. So yeah, but and also then there are these situations when basically when we are both together and I get exactly the help I need, like for example she can explain me where certain things are located, just identify things I need to be identified. I know that sometimes from just maybe um, looking to us, it might seem that actually everything is fine to you. You don't need any help, like because it's not as visible as it may be. But if I would be on my own, then actually, I don't know, I might get lost and cause a lot of problems for myself, and I don't know for the other people who are involved. And then it would be like super visible that actually there is a problem. But when I get the help, then it's like, oh, maybe you actually lied about this, and I don't know, we organized this for you that you can have a support person, though mostly no one actually mostly you, if it's like a, I don't know, a literature festival or event like that, mostly people are not willing to pay for the support person to come with you, so it's quite difficult. But yeah, in a way it's the same situation. When you get the help you need, then you are perceived of maybe exaggerating the help you needed. But then when you not help, then you basically, if I can't have the help I need, then I just won't be going. So
Yeah, exactly. I get something similar where I think the one that sticks out in my mind is that I have a disabled parking permit. I don't know if you have a similar scheme in your country,
yeah, we
but in
do.
Australia,
Mhm.
we have, yeah, so I have a disabled parking permit. Um, and if I'm not using a mobility aid, I look fine. And I'll have people come up to me and question me about why I have this permit and assume it's my grandparents' permit or something like that. Because I don't look disabled, not realizing that on a lot of days, if I didn't have that permit, I would be collapsed on the floor of the supermarket because I had to walk that much further to get there. So it's like that thing of you can't see the disability because I have the support. But if I didn't have the support, I'd be sent to hospital.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
um, yeah, another thing I wanted to touch on, which you also talked about, is like the situation where with being poor or low income, which is as you
Mm.
already explained it in the beginning, and we talked about it, very very tied to disabled experience, because yeah, people with disabled people often can't work, or they can only work partially, or they have to work low paid or underpaid jobs, and they have to how to somehow survive on disability support, which is super small, and I guess in most countries. And but you talk about that also, like being poor or low income, um, it doesn't mean that you don't deserve having joy, having hobbies, having saving up and having nice things, whether those be, I don't know, dyed hair or tattoos, or um, going to concerts or saving up and going for a trip or something like that. But there is often like such a hostility towards such belief, and also this assumption that, oh, if you publicly show that you have something nice, or if you I don't know, might sound like problematic in the I don't know, patriarchal societies beauty standards, but if you look nice, I don't know, in some way, that you might be lying about it, about your financial struggles, and it can't be that situation is actually so bad, and which is, yeah, super weird, because we do learn how to save up and how to live with actually with very very little money sometimes. Yeah, can you maybe talk about this? Yeah, why there is, first of all, this very narrow perception of how poor or low income people should be looking, and also, yeah, why there is such a hostility towards the idea that poor people also deserve to enjoy life and to be happy at least time to time.
Mm. I think one thing a lot of people don't realize is how much sacrifice goes into us having the dyed hair and the concerts and the. I see a lot of women, especially, getting attacked for having like manicured nails when they're on a low income, like that sort of thing. Um, I think people. I don't want to make judgments on people I don't know, of course, but I do always assume that it comes from a place of needing to feel superior. You know, that they're on a, well, this is part of the capitalist thing again, right? That the wealthier are better people. You know, they're doing better, they've won in life, they're working harder, all of that sort of stuff, which implies that those of us who are on low incomes, who are poorer, aren't working as hard, aren't as successful, aren't as deserving of things like happiness. Because we live in a society, of course, where happiness is very much bought. Like, you have to pay for everything. So money not only buys security, but it buys hobbies and enjoyment and happiness. And so I think there is this perception that if you are on a low income, you have somehow failed. You're somehow a worse person. You're a lesser human being. You're less deserving of these things. And I think that that sort of rhetoric has only been heightened given the current economic system, economic circumstances that a lot of countries face. I'm sure your country is probably similar. In Australia, we're dealing with a housing crisis. We're dealing with cost of living crises, like fuel crises. It's things are all very expensive. These problems are starting to affect middle class people too, not just the poor. And so people on higher incomes are starting to feel what it's like to struggle financially. And they're looking at those of us who are even poorer and seeing us have these nice things that we've saved for and worked for and sacrificed for, and think that that's unfair given they're now struggling too. And those are things that they used to enjoy. So I think it is part of needing to feel like you are better than other people because you are wealthier, therefore you've done more, you've done better, and you deserve more than what a poor person does.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, we also definitely have the same situation here because of the like the wars and everything else happening, that the prices for everything has just skyrocketed, and now even the people who maybe have like normal paying jobs are starting to struggle. And yeah, because the food is super expensive, and everything is just super expensive. And yeah, then you maybe look
Mm.
on other people, and people who are even poorer than you, and you feel that, oh, but how can this be that you say that you struggle, but like you have died here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also, especially when you come to disability and disability support and welfare payments, a comment that I get a lot is, why should my tax money pay for your tattoo? You know, this idea that somehow we're directly taking people's money from their bank account to pay for our concert or our hair dye, and that when we ask for pensions to be increased, we're saying, give us more of your income, random middle class person. Um, Not realizing that one, these payments are meant to live off, they're meant to supplement our entire lives, not just the basic necessities, but also that when we advocate for increasing pensions, we're not advocating for increasing the taxes of working class people. We're advocating for increasing the taxes of big business and millionaires and billionaires and people who are far wealthier than everyone who's complaining. And so I think there is also that sense of injustice that I'm struggling financially. My money's going to this disabled person who's spending it on a concert and a holiday. That's not fair. Why should my money go to that when I'm already struggling?
Yeah, of course, as a disabled person doesn't wouldn't deserve at least this one thing, one nice thing in their lives, but whatever that might be, like the dyed hair or whatnot. Yeah, that
Or
is.
that we also don't pay tax,
Yeah, exactly.
that we
Yeah,
also don't contribute to this.
this is so funny because I have like experienced this situation. I mean, I don't have a such a platform as you do, so I maybe don't get such like hate comments and bullshit like that. But like when I, for example, on Facebook have advocated for immigration policies or things like that, that we should like be more open about these things, and then I have gotten comments. This one time particularly, I remember because this person actually like knew who I am and that, yeah, that I'm disabled, and he told me, you know what, if you would be working and you would be paying taxes, then you could like come with these radical ideas, but no, it would be better if you could just like stay silent. And like, of course, it's like so problematic and ableist to say something like that in the first place, but I was like, also, do you even understand how the tax system works? I do pay taxes.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if your country is similar, but in Australia, we pay tax on every single purchase we make. We have something called goods and service tax, where every item that you buy, with a few exceptions for basic essentials, is subject to a 10% tax. So even a disabled person who isn't working at all, isn't paying any income tax, is still paying a significant amount of tax because they buy things.
Yeah, we also have this, and this also goes for the utilities and all kinds of payments you are making. That there
Mm.
is the PVN, how we call it. Yes, so
Yeah, people assume that because income tax is the one that we have to consciously file every single year, that must be the only type of tax in existence.
yeah,
Forgetting that there's about 500 other types of taxes that we all pay, even if we aren't in paid employment. And a lot of us who are on welfare payments and disability pensions are in paid employment too. We
exactly.
just can't work enough to be financially independent.
Exactly. And I also don't know what's the system like in Australia, but in Latvia at least, it's like if you receive the disability pension and if you work, of course, there are like different. I don't know how to call it. Different models how you can be paid. Like there might be the like full time employment, and there is the if you are self-employed, then it's different because you are in a different tax regime. But basically, for example, if you have a full-time or part-time work in some kind of institution, which would be the, yeah, I don't know how it's called in English, but like the basic working working relationships, then your disability payments get smaller automatically. and
Yeah.
and that is so ridiculous because they are already like uh, I remember when I was like working in museum for part time, and at that point the disability payment was around 300 euros, which is like super low. And then like my part time wage was also like not to the lower side, and that small disability payment was lessened to like I think 200 euros, and yeah, 200 euros and something a little bit over 200 euros, but I think it's just like ridiculous.
Yeah, it's very similar in Australia. Our full amount for disability pension without rent assist, if you're not renting privately, is about 600 Australian dollars a week, which, if my very rough understanding of euros, it's probably about 450 euros a week, like 450 euros a week. And then in Australia, if you are working and you earn more than $100 a week Australian, which is about 75 euros a week, your pension starts getting reduced by 50 cents for every dollar that you earn over that $100 a week amount. So our payments are already on the poverty line in Australia.
Mm.
And it makes it very difficult then for a disabled person to increase their income significantly, because if you work more than 5 hours a week, less than five, probably 4 hours a week in a minimum wage job, your pension starts getting reduced.
Yeah, that is so unfair. But in the same time, like if at least care if you are self-employed, or if you get yeah, I can't remember what's the English term for autoratlīdzība, which basically is if you do some kind of um, I don't know if you are translating, and then there's a specific tax regime for you. If you are writing
Mm.
articles or something like that, which is not like the full employment, then it's not like that. You can it. I mean, you are still
Yeah,
paying
it's
tax,
similar in Australia.
but it doesn't
If
affect
you're
your disability support, and that is just so weird, because then you can get, even like in this tax regime, you can get even like, I don't know, paid a couple of thousand. I mean, it rarely happens, but let's generate the imagined situation, and it wouldn't affect your disability support. But if you would just work the regular job, and then you would receive, I don't know, part-time wage, which let's say would be 500 euros per month, which is a like typical part-time job payment in Latvia, then your disability payment will be smaller, and that is just so weird and so illogical. And yeah.
Yeah, well, that's my recent discovery is that if you own a business in Australia and you're on Centrelink, it doesn't get reported the same way that employment income does because I've had to operate my music as a business. That's just a legal requirement in
Mhm.
Australia because I can earn money off it. And Centrelink only collect my income from my business, like the information about that, once a year when I file taxes. And so I could potentially earn $2 million off of my music in the next, like in the 12 months of a tax year. My pension wouldn't get cut at all. It would only get cut in July once my taxes are filed, and I wouldn't have to pay any of that pension back that I had been paid for the previous year. But if I was paid $2 million in an employment job, I would have to report that every 2 weeks, and I would lose my pension immediately. And so it is a little bit odd the way that these things work.
Yeah, a little bit. It's even like an understatement.
Just a tad.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I also, since you are going to another topic, since you are a content creator, I wanted to ask you about online spaces, because there is this term, chronically online, which I guess has rather negative connotations. But like, for example,
Mm.
for me, and I think it might be similar for a lot of disabled people, the online spaces are very, very important. And I think online spaces have been very important to me since I first started to have access to internet, because yeah, in the beginning I just published my poems online because I didn't have anyone I would be able to share them with. But like these days, I um, for largely I do engage with content which is created by disabled and neurodivergent creators, and that is really, really important to me, and even gives me a sense of belonging. And especially because like I don't have an offline disability community, and also like I would say any community where I would feel that I offline community that where I truly belong, and which is also fully accessible to me, and where I would feel that I'm like fully understood and my access needs are fully understood. And also about events, like I do go out and I do experience events also real life, but a lot of times the online events are much accessible. And if there's some kind of event is like both in real life and also, I don't know, via Zoom available, or just in via Zoom, it's much more likely that I will attend. And yeah, so I wanted to ask you about this, like how do you experience the online space as a content creator, but also just in general? And also, how do you think, is there maybe certain aspects of online space which maybe disabled people can appreciate and experience?
Well, online spaces for me are pretty much the only way that I get any amount of social interaction day to day. Because of my disabilities, I am predominantly housebound. So I only leave the house 1 to 2 times a week for a couple of hours each time because that's what I'm physically able to do. And because I live alone, that means that I don't see people in my day to day life. I don't get to talk to anyone. I can very easily go weeks to months without having a conversation with another human being in person. And so if it wasn't for social media and being able to connect with other people online, I would be completely isolated. And I think we all know that that sort of isolation is not great for a person's mental health, to say the least. Um, so for me, not only just creating content and building a community of my own, but even before then, finding other content creators who are also disabled, especially people with my diagnoses when I was first developing these chronic illnesses and getting diagnosed, was incredibly helpful for me. Not only in terms of feeling like I'm not alone, but also in helping to navigate like the medical system, disability support services, all these things that are very new when you are newly disabled and have a massive learning curve with how they all work. Um, so yeah, I think for me, online spaces are absolutely essential for me just functioning as a person. And that's where I'm sure I'm not the only one who gets incredibly frustrated when people say, "Oh, you need to go touch grass." I'm like, I bloody would if I could get outside, but I can't go outside, so that's not exactly a possibility. But yeah, so I think the whole way that chronically online is thrown around as an insult, that people are spending too much time online, just is incredibly dismissive of the way that disabled people are still forced to be isolated to their homes, out of public view. Even though it might not be official government policy anymore, there's still all of the systems and like structures in place that still make that happen. And so yeah, I think part of my hope in making content online, and I'm sure you're probably similar with this podcast, is to help connect with other disabled people and help other people feel less alone and help myself feel less alone as well.
Yeah, for sure. Mm, yeah, I can very much relate to what you mentioned about like not sometimes even speaking with or meeting anyone for days or for weeks or for months. Like before I started to live together with my partner, that was basically my reality. I just was alone at home most of the time, especially when the university was over. Then yeah, and there was no reason for me to just leave my house. And yeah, that's how the online space was where actually the real life happened. And also I have these very um, controversial feelings also towards pandemic, because it's of course it was like horrible, and also like for the vulnerable groups even worse than for the other people. But I don't know how it was in other countries, but at least here a lot of things suddenly started to get much more accessible because they just moved online. And I started to join, for example, organizations about which I know that I wouldn't have joined them beforehand, because I would it takes so much planning and so much it's just so much work on my side to be able to go somewhere. I have to plan the route, and also yeah to yes, it's also because of the neurodivergence, it's just super overwhelming to be and to meet people. So yeah, it was just suddenly possible to attend events, and it was so nice. And then I hear all these, oh, pandemic is over and now we can just go back to real life and just meet people like face to face. And I'm like, okay, but this is your definition of real life. For me, real life is joining a Zoom event, and for example being able to identify easily who else is joining this event, because I can see the names under the people's pictures. Since I don't recognize faces, for mostly it's yeah, that's just one of the challenges experience. But like, yeah, there might be many things which I could like just note down, which why the online events are more accessible for me. Yeah, so I guess the disabled experience is not often considered when we mention these. Oh, just let's get back to the real life.
Yeah, the pandemic was a weird experience, wasn't it? Because everyone overnight suddenly became incredibly concerned about the risks of social isolation and how harmful it is to be stuck at home and not be able to go more than 2 kilometers from your house. And I think partly, I mean, I have to recognize my privilege here being in Australia, because we did not have the traumatic pandemic experience that many other countries had. We, being an island nation, were able to contain um, the spread into our country and around our country much more easily than other countries were. So we didn't have to deal with the hundreds and thousands of deaths every single day that a lot of other places did. With the exception of Melbourne, who were on lockdown every second day, it felt like a lot of us, life was relatively normal other than having to work at home and study from home and all that sort of thing. But even then, there were so many concerted efforts from the government, from universities, from workplaces, from community groups to make socializing from home possible, to move universities 100% online. Workplaces went 100% online. People were hosting craft events online. There were exercise, gym sessions every day online. Just everyone's life moved online for about 2 years. And then, as you said, they decided that the pandemic was over. Our economy can't afford a pandemic anymore. We have to get on with it. And it's not that everyone went back outside again that gets me. It's that they took all of the infrastructure and all of the programs they'd made away. All the workplaces went back in person again. I was studying at university at the time. I'd had 2 years of everything being done online to suddenly at the start of one semester being told, we can't do practical classes online anymore. You have to go on campus to do them. No exceptions. It's not possible to do it online after having done it for 2 years. All of the social events stopped happening, all of that incredibly accessible infrastructure that had allowed disabled people to study and work and live full lives for 2 years just got cut overnight because we declared that the pandemic that still exists is no longer happening and everyone can go outside again. And I think it's then made extra infuriating by the way that a lot of, I'm going to say non-disabled people with the clarification, it's people who aren't homebound or bedbound. So disabled people can be part of this too, but it is mostly non-disabled people. The way that they have forgotten how hard those 2 years were, how hard they found it to be stuck at home all day, how much they were complaining about not being able to go outside all the time and socialize and do all their normal life things, how they've forgotten how hard that was and then gone back to acting like those of us who are disabled and homebound or bedbound are asking for too much when we ask for online events or we ask for things to be made accessible or we ask for the help to be able to leave our homes, as if they haven't experienced like a little glimpse into what our lives are like and couldn't cope with it. So I wish that we took the lessons we learned during the pandemic to make our society better and not just turned our back and forgot what happened.
Yeah, exactly. I also have experienced this was like what I was thinking when the pandemic started, because before the pandemic I have a couple of these experiences where I was in the job interviews and I never got those jobs. But one of the things we discussed about my like potential um, access access needs they might um, access support they might provide for me was that I may at least partially work from home. And these are, I'm talking about like the state institutions, not like some, I don't know, random private businesses. And the answer often was like when I was explaining why this is important for me and asking for this, the answer was like, oh no, we are a state institution and we are just working here like in this space and no working for home, though that would be my access need. And yeah, but this is we also don't have like laws which really like protects disabled people from such kind of
Mm.
discrimination. But then technically we do, but these are very broad laws. There is not like something like, I know, the ADA in USA or something like that, which could really allow you to sue someone if they just say we won't be doing this. But then the pandemic started and overnight it was possible for people to work from home for this, like even in the same institutions. And it was just like, this is such a hypocrisy. How can, because like now there is health concerns for most of the society, that if the people would go to their workplace that they will get sick and they will endanger others. But like when this from just like a minority group, then they can do this because it's impossible, so called. And yeah, that was just striking to me how this, yeah, the level of
I,
the
I went I went from studying at university during the pandemic and excelling at it. Like I was getting high distinctions, A's and everything, and doing everything online was accessible for me. And then they stopped online classes and even the online universities these days. in the degrees that I want to get, they still require you to go on campus over the university holidays and do in person classes full time for a week, which I can't do. And so I went from excelling at uni, feeling like I was really getting somewhere, to having to drop out of uni entirely and give up on a degree because I can't fulfill the in person components. And it's not possible anymore to do them online, even though it was for 2 years. And I think in terms of like the what you said about they only cared when it started affecting the quote unquote normal people, here in Australia, I don't know if it happened in many other places. I was on our unemployment welfare payment when COVID started because I hadn't gotten all of my diagnoses. I couldn't apply for disability pension yet. And when the pandemic started and all the quote unquote normal people lost their jobs because, they all had to stay home, the government effectively doubled the rate of unemployment benefits. It went from being, I think it was around 600 Australian dollars a week to 1,200 a week. And they did that for about 1 year. They didn't increase disability pension at all. That was the same. And then once they decided that the pandemic had ended and all the quote unquote normal people got their jobs, they put the unemployment benefits right back down to $600 a week where they started. They plunged all of us right back into severe poverty. And to this day, unemployment benefits are well below the poverty line in Australia.
Yeah, that is so weird.
But I think it just goes back to that point that if it's just the disabled people that are being affected, who cares? It's only when the non disabled people start dealing with the issue that they try and fix it. But then, as we've seen after the pandemic, if the problem goes away for non disabled people, they stop caring again. And they take all of the improvements they made away because it suddenly becomes too much effort to keep them in place.
Yeah, I think here it's like there are certain things which have stayed online or at least partially online, but like it's not that you can expect that this will definitely happen. For example, if there are even um, like for example, if there are some kind of like government meetings which should be public, meaning that you can go there and you can be present and you can like hear what will be this if it's like some kind of discussion, for example a specific law project. But if you write and ask whether this will be also possible, available also like to join via Zoom, that they might just say no without any kind of explanation, though that is a discrimination, because if it's public and if every can join and be like present, then you should also like make it available online. But there are certain situations, for example the ways how can you apply for certain how can you put in your project proposals. For example, there is this institution called Balst Kultūrkapitāla, don't know how to translate it in English, but basically the most the, the main institution which supports uh, all the culture field, like the organizations, but also if you are a writer, you can, for example, apply for a scholarship. And before pandemic, it was that you have to print out your project, you have to like write your project proposal, then you have to print it out, you have to sign it, and you have to physically get into go to that institution and to give it to them. And it was super hard for me because like I can't read printed text. That means that
Mm.
this, yeah, and it's just so ridiculous because like I am, yeah, I'm making the project on my computer, and then I have to like print it out, and then I have to like sign it, and then I have to physically go there. I mean, it's doable, but it just seems kind of,
More difficult than it should be.
yeah, exactly. And it's also not sustainable, I would say, even
No.
like from the research perspective. But in pandemic, they started to they made the system like that you online, that you just send in the projects e-signed, and this has stayed, and I'm very grateful for that because this is something I regularly do. So yeah, that was a huge
Yeah.
burden, and there are maybe other things which have stayed the same, but yeah, of course, mostly they have vanished, and that is, yeah, sad and not fair.
Well,
And
something that I've noticed, and I'm curious whether you have observed this too in your country, is that speaking of like town meetings and applications and all that, if it is something to do with disability, they do all the disabled accessibility things. If it's something not to do with disability, they don't do any of it. They only really make the effort to make it accessible when it's something that is specifically relevant to disabled people. And it's just this expectation that if it's not relevant to disabled people, then disabled people don't need to be there and we don't need to make it accessible. And I
Yeah,
think it just reinforces this idea that if you are disabled, you don't fit into regular society. You only need to come out when it's something to do with your community.
yeah, exactly. I think it's also, yeah, it might be the same here, and also I have noticed that um, it the same goes for even the cultural events. Like if this event somehow relates to disability, I don't know, it's the performer is disabled, or something like that, then the festival or the organizers, or whatever this is, might try to do, and to emphasize on might try to do, to make it accessible for disabled people. But if it's
Yeah.
just a
Like
regular,
bring out the sign language interpreters and
yeah,
the
yeah,
wheelchair ramps
yeah,
and all
yeah,
that. But
exactly. But if it's just let's say a regular poetry reading, nothing like that most likely won't happen. I
yeah,
mean, the situation is getting better. I also can't say that, oh, everything is just shit and so bad, because also the cultural field is underfinanced, and everyone is struggling. That's true, and I have to note that, so
mm,
because I know that my colleagues might like listen to this and might like saying that, oh, I'm just talking bad about everyone. But that is true, that yeah, that the regular events which has nothing to have nothing to do with disability are often in whatever field this might be, the government meeting, the culture, whatnot, they most likely won't be accessible. So yeah, because you and then there are even these, like, because I remember from the time when I was working in museum, when I was an accessibility specialist, so I had to work with these matters, and some of the colleagues who mentioned something like, yeah, but actually then we make something accessible and no one comes to these events. And it's like, yeah, because if the disabled community like how gotten used for years and years to the fact that nothing is accessible, you can't expect that you will implement this one thing and everyone will come and you will be thanked, and everyone will be so grateful to you. Yeah, this is so, yeah, so I guess it's also here the problem that if you try to and do something and no one comes for who this for whom this access is really needed, that they will just decide, oh, actually disabled people are not interested in culture, so it's not it's not worth making the
well,
events
that's kind
accessible.
of the it's the like self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? Because that was my biggest battle at universities. I was in some disabled student collectives that did a lot of advocacy to making universities more accessible, and their argument was always, we don't need to be more accessible because only, I don't know, 2% of our students need these accessibility things. I was like, well, but only 2% need them because it's not accessible to everyone. So the people who need them aren't coming.
Yeah.
And it's that thing of like, if your venue has been inaccessible for 10 years and you decide for one night you're going to make it accessible, and you don't really advertise it, you don't talk about it much, you don't reach out to local disability organizations, disabled people aren't going to come because we're not going to check your venue's website every day for 10 years, just hoping one day you decide to change things. And I know a lot of people always argue about the business side of it and that, these industries are struggling, they can't afford it, like it's expensive. And I always say, though, if you're not accessible, you're excluding a whole group of people from your potential customer base, right? Because disability isn't a small minority group. In Australia, there's, I think, 5 million people out of 27 million who have some form of disability. So you're excluding like 25% of all the population if you aren't accessible for disabled people. So, sure, these accessibility things might cost money to implement, but by implementing them, you are increasing the number of customers that you are able to get. You're increasing the amount of money that you're able to make. And so I do get a bit frustrated when people talk about accessibility in public spaces and events as kind of this money sinkhole, as if disabled people don't have money to spend at the events and at the business.
Mm, yeah, exactly. um yeah, I guess we are slightly up slowly slowly approaching the end of our conversation, but I also definitely want to ask you one more question. And you are also a musician, and you make your music and your music videos as well completely by yourself, which I think is super amazing. I always watch your content and I'm like, oh my god, this is so cool, because like you play various instruments and you sing and you can also put it all together. And yeah, thinking I even can't edit my podcast. I mean, I can a little bit, and I'm improving, but and I'm learning, but yeah, for the most part I don't do it myself. So yeah, I wanted to ask you about this. Can you tell about what music making means to you, and especially what it means to you as a disabled and queer artist?
Well, to start with, there was a point in time where I couldn't play any instruments and I couldn't record and I couldn't mix. Well, it's debatable whether I can mix songs or not. I'm still learning that one. But, we all start somewhere. We all start not knowing how to do something and we all take time learning. And for those of us who are disabled, sometimes that just takes longer, right? We have to work to our own pace. But for me, music it's been something that I've done my entire life. I grew up playing flute in an orchestra, so I have always been involved in music, but I really took it on as a hobby and passion project a couple years ago. And I did that because all of the other things that I had in my life that I enjoyed and that I really identified myself with were no longer doable for me because of my disabilities and because my body had essentially failed to function when I was 19. So, I was an athlete. I was aiming to go into zoological conservation or research, and those things were no longer possible. And so I really lost my identity and all the things that I was good at. And once I got my diagnosis, once I got onto disability pension, it was kind of that moment of what do I do now? Who am I? I'm only 25. What do I do with my life? And so I started music partly, well, started just me learning bass guitar as a hobby to give me something to do. And then it slowly kind of evolved into me writing my own music, learning some more instruments, learning the production side, really as a way to express the things that I've been through and to process all the things that I've been through. Because as I've mentioned, I am very socially isolated. I don't really have people to talk to about this sort of thing. And so music became kind of my therapist, I guess. And, I write my experiences into my songs, and working on them gives me a chance to really feel what I've been through and process it. And then sharing it with the world, I've found has helped me connect with other people, not just in my country, but across the world, clearly, because I'm here on this podcast with someone from Latvia, which is really amazing. And so, yeah, it's been a way for me to heal from the trauma of becoming disabled and losing all of those things. Um, and now it's become something that I really enjoy doing. And sometimes it is the only thing that gets me out of bed, is knowing that I need to practice that song on guitar today. So I can't just lie in bed all day moping around. I have to do something. And it has also given me a little bit of hope for the future. Even though I know that I'm not going to become a famous artist, that's not going to happen realistically. There is still that, like, what if question, that there feels like for the first time in a little while that there are possibilities for the future, that there are things I can work towards, there are potential avenues for me improving my situation. So yeah, I think for me, music has really kind of given me hope and given me my life back a bit, and that sounds really cheesy, but I have really found a lot in it, and that's why I really talk a lot about the importance of finding hobbies and finding things that you enjoy and finding things to work on. Even if you are disabled and living on welfare, those are things that you deserve to have, and those are things that are really important for us to have.
Mm. Yeah, it doesn't sound cheesy at all, because I think I guess writing is in a way very different from music. I mean, from the practice perspective, how you do it. But yeah, I also would say that it's really, at least at some points in my life, it definitely has helped me to like survive, or to keep looking forward, and to like feel that, oh, but I actually still have a lot of things I want to say, and this is like the form of creation I can do it through. So yeah. Mm.
Mm. I think it also gives you a feeling that you're still progressing and still achieving things. Because, even if the circumstances in your life can't be improved, you're never going to become non-disabled, you're never going to be able to work, you're still watching that song or that story or that book progress and get better. And so you still feel like you're moving forward even when your circumstances aren't necessarily changing.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think it helps you to redefine somehow the value for I don't know, for your life, but also for things in general, that maybe having the full-time job is not the only thing which makes us valuable, and we can
Hmm.
live and work.
Well,
And
and that's for me,
because
it's become.
yeah, sorry,
Sorry, you go.
yeah, I definitely consider writing a work. It is a work for
Hmm.
me, so
Yeah,
it's not a
absolutely. And I
hobby.
think, yeah, well, and I think that's where if you are disabled and you can't work in standard employment, your work, your career, and your vocation isn't necessarily about earning a salary, because that's not always possible. So, for me, music has become a part of my identity. It has become what I consider to be my primary job, even though it is very much a hobby. I'm not earning a living off of it. I'm never going to earn a living off of it. But it is still the main thing that I do. It is kind of my passion. It's what if I hadn't become disabled, I'd gotten my degree and gone into my dream job, it would have been what that job was for me. It's just that I'm not earning a salary off of it because I can't earn a salary off it.
Hmm. Yeah,
I think it is healthy and helpful if you are disabled or limited in your work capacity for some reason to find something to define yourself by other than paid employment or your salary that you report on your tax every year.
yeah, for sure. um is there something I haven't asked you, which you would want to still mention or put into this conversation?
I think the main point that I kind of want people to take from this is that if you are disabled, you are not worthless. You're not any less valuable than a non-disabled person. You can still contribute to society, even if it's not in the standard ways. Something that I really try and live by is that if you can just make a stranger smile, you've contributed something to society. So, if you're walking in the supermarket and you see someone wearing a really nice dress, just go up and compliment them, say it's a nice dress, make their day a bit better, and that's a contribution. You don't have to adhere to these strict capitalist standards in order to be valuable.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Thank you so much that you agreed to come onto the podcast, and yeah, for everything you shared. And I will definitely put the links on your social media and also to your where your music is available on the podcast series, this episode's description. So also people who are listening can find your content. And yeah, thank you for everything you do, because it's really uh, yeah, I watch your videos regularly, and they are really helpful and yeah, supportive somehow. And yeah, I also think that, as I think I mentioned that already in the beginning, but as many things can be said about being chronically online, but I think it's super cool that I can just reach out to someone from another part of the world, and we can have this conversation. Yeah, so thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been great.
Thank you so much for listening. This was my conversation with Džej Morgan. If you like the podcast and want to support it, you can do so by sharing this episode on your social media or sending it to someone who you think might enjoy it. It's also possible to support the podcast financially if you want to. You can do so via PayPal or Patreon, though I have to note that on Patreon I only have one episode in English so far. So if you are only an English speaker, maybe Patreon is not your best option yet. Anyhow, thanks for listening. Paldies, ka klausījies. Šī bija mana saruna ar Džeju Morganu. Ja tev patīk podkāsts un tu vēlies atbalstīt tā veidošanu, tu vari dalīties ar šo sēriju savos sociālajos tīklos vai aizsūtīt to kādam, kam tavuprāt tā varētu patikt un būt nozīmīga. Podkāstu var atbalstīt arī finansiāli platformās PayPal un Patreon. Jāpiebilst, ka Patreon saturu, tāpat kā pilnīgi visu saturu, es veidoju lēni, tomēr tas saturs, kas tur ir klausāms un lasāms, manuprāt, ir ļoti svarīgs un foršs. Tur ir klausāmas vairākas sarunas par literatūru un grāmatām, dzirdami mani dzējoļi un atdzējojumi un vēl šis tas. Paldies tev, ka klausies un atbalsti podkāstu. Podkāstu Intersekcionalitātes istaba veido Katrīna Rudzīte, montē Karīna Ieškiņa un mūziku veido Gundaga Graudiņa.